go through three very famous examples, all of which show up in iconography. And you will note that we're having a double experience of theosis by doing this. So on the one hand, right, we're having this encounter of seeing by learning from each icon. Each icon is teaching us a theology, right? But it's also in the very experience of seeing icons that we're discovering that if we see the right way, the material world, the world of being, the world of creation, right, is there to show us what it means to live with God, to be part of that, right? So iconology is a way of life, it's not just a science. So this is one example of theosis, which we celebrate liturgically, right? The meeting of the Lord, right? Where Simeon says, right? My eyes have seen my salvation. My eyes have seen my salvation. Next, please. The Annunciation is perhaps the most potent example of theosis being in this world. Why? Because the story, and people tend to miss this, by the way. Very rarely hear this preached. But the story of the Annunciation is not just what the angel has to say. It's incomplete until Mary says yes. Until she says, be it done unto me. A perfect statement of humility, but it's a human action that completes the circle of theosis. Next, please. And that's made particularly clear by the fact that the example I just showed you is part of a two-sided icon. So we were looking at the back side of it, which is the active side, but the front side of it is the passive, is the static side, the hieratic side. So the outcome of her saying yes is the incarnation, which is the saving of the flesh of man. Next, please. And perhaps the very best such story of theosis, right, is Emmaus, which again you hear very little about, but is absolutely central to the gospel. And you notice that's where understanding really comes in. We aren't sort of told why Mary understands so suddenly, but in this story we're absolutely told, right? Because the two disciples are walking with him. You see in the Byzantine mosaic they're walking with him on the road. They don't know who he is. But then in the breaking of the bread, right? And it's very clearly shown as communion in this beautiful modern icon. Their eyes are opened. But it's the eyes of their hearts. What they say is, did not our hearts burn within us? Would you put this on the icon stand in your church? I would. Next, please. And so, we come to the next to last quotation, right? Which says that by Christ, right, giving us the knowledge of Him, we have become partakers of the divine nature. And that's where, right, if you notice I emphasize it in dark, that's where koinonia comes in. Right? To be partakers is to be in koinonia with Christ, in communion with Christ, in service to Christ. So what we're called on, if that's true, is mimesis, imitation. We're called on to be imitators, to put on Christ. Right? We say it's Romans 6:1, and we say it in baptism, right? And we repeat it on Holy Saturday and many other days. Right? Put on Christ. Right? And walk in love as Christ loved us. Next, please. That's why, if you want to show what a bishop really is, you do an exact imitation of showing who Christ is. If you notice, every detail of these two icons is the same except the Theosis. And the bishop doesn't have a halo. This is, by the way, the earliest icon of St. Nicholas. Next, please. So we're nearly there. So, in the Wisdom of Solomon, we read that God created human beings for incorruption, and so, it's that second verb, He made them, right, the image of His own nature, right? It's that second verb. And therefore, this, the second most famous passage in the New Testament, is always called in scholarly literature the conversion passage, the metanoia passage. And you notice there's not a word in it about conversion. The word is, it's all about transformation. And the key of it is form, conformed, transformed. Right? And the words are schema, morphic, form. Therefore, next please. When you are looking at Christ, you are looking in the mirror. Another footnote at this point, if I may, throw out once and for all and forever the idea that icons are open to heaven. There is no such terminology anywhere until the end of the 19th century. Right. And it's completely wrong. Look at the windows. There's something else on the other side of the window. You're here, it's there. Right? Christ is not the something else. He's your mirror image. He's what you see when you look in the mirror. Right? And that's the patristic vocabulary, going all the way back to the Epistle of James, as you see there. Right? Going all the way back to the Epistle of James. And then if you make that final step of love, you, the image of God, will start to become the mirror for everyone else. You want to see this face in your daily life without having it, carrying it around with you or having it in church as some kind of magical object or feeling you can only see it when you're in church. You want to see this in daily life? Look to the left. Do it. Come on, do it. Look to the right. You have seen the face of Christ. Yes. So pass the kiss of peace. Last slide is a repetition of the last slide is a repetition of the takeaway. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So before we take questions now, we've got about 20 minutes for that. I'd just like to introduce Father Tedros, representing the Ethiopian Orthodox Church under Bishop Theosis. So welcome and thank you for coming. Questions, you can come line up here if you have questions for Professor Schneider, and I will hand you the microphone. Not all those questions at once, okay?
Well, actually, a little comment of Professor Schneider about chimpanzees and humans, a concept that you raised during the class. I did research on it, and I found what's really different, fits very well in the theology. The real difference between the two, humans, even the little baby, can point a finger to something, to hold the attention of somebody else, to transfer information to others. When a chimpanzee, even a grown-up one, does not have that ability. So this is the human's part. even in a baby, about sharing with others.
Yes, actually, I can take that one step further because my daughter just finished her PhD on this topic. And so she was researching for 5 years cooperation among chimpanzees, and what she found was that chimpanzees do cooperate, but only in a Machiavellian way. That is, everyone engaged in the cooperation is seeking his own ends. And therefore, altruistic cooperation seems to be a uniquely human characteristic. She's now busily working on babies and young children for comparative research. So kinomia is not a chimpanzee property. but social order is.
Yes.
Social order, culture, following the rules, that's all part of the game. But not kinomia.
Anyone else? I'll even come to you. Troy?
Thank you for your presentation. One quick question where I feel like I need to salvage the icon of the ladder of divine ascent. I wonder if we can start by calling the ladder as the ladder of divine descent in order for humanity, maybe through a monastic lifestyle, to be able to ascend the ladder. So the starting point is the descent of the ladder, by which we can rise up.
Slide 10, please. Don't get me wrong, the icon is fantastic. And if I had done a thorough iconological analysis, that would have been a second hour. That really would. You're actually right. So remember, I was talking about how it is often read, not about how the icon itself. The theology is just potential in the icon. Because if you notice at the top of the ladder, right, is Christ. So it really is theosis. It's Christ calling, right, and the monks responding. And the group that's down in the lower right is the living community, right? And they're balanced in the upper left by a choir of angels. So the icon, in fact, does have great order, right? And can be used to represent a healthy monastic theosis theology, sure, absolutely. And as you saw in the quotations, right, monks who keep their eyes fixed on grace, right, have no trouble with this at all. It's the semi-Pelagians who think that the spiritual warfare is something we do, right, not something we're called to do. Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. But you notice how completely, in fact, the Sundays of Lent have been taken over by this kind of notion that the ascetic monastic way is the way to go, and the hesychast way too. So in our Byzantine calendar, we have the Sundays are now given over to Gregory Palamas, Mary of Egypt, and the Ladder. Somehow the cross sneaks in there in the middle.
Any more questions? Okay.